Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raad Life. The nature of this pandemic that we're dealing with, the coronavirus pandemic that is preoccupying all of us, it is the one thing that is very unique about it is, and we don't usually encounter with situations like this, is that it's not limited to any particular geography. It's not limited to any particular culture. It's actually a global situation. And so when we say we're in this together, we're really in this together beyond our immediate tribe. This is a very much a global common experience that we're going through right now on many levels. So with that being said, I've been doing these episodes almost once a day, and I wanted to bring in or start to bring in sort of an international perspective, people from different parts of the world, people that have maybe lived in different parts of the world, what they're seeing in their corner of the planet, what's going on, what are some of our shared experiences. And I couldn't think of a better person to start that off with than Trudy Bannister, who is currently in Australia, but she actually, until recently, was living in the south of France. She is a psychologist. She's a life coach. She is sought out and has clients all over the world. She is a psychotherapist. She's the owner of Trudi Bannister's Built for Bliss. And so she is in the green room, and I'm going to bring her on, and let's see what she has to share with us from her corner of the planet. Trudy, are you there? Hello, Trudy.
I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
So I started off when you were in the green room. I said that one of the unique things about what's going on right now is that we don't usually experience this in a large scale. I mean, if a person themselves have lived in different parts of the world, if they have a background where they may have friends and people that they know in different parts of the planet, that usually is an interesting perspective. You and I think share that. The thing though about this particular pandemic, in terms of the stresses, the strifes, the things that are challenging, the unique thing about it, I think, right now, is that it is a global experience. I mean, it's somebody told me the other day that's the ultimate experiment, social experiment, right? It has no borders, right? Ironically, it also doesn't have a budget. It's basically, we're all going through it without really any assigned budget. But so what I wanted to do is give you an opportunity to tell people what you do. I did say that you are currently on the other side of the planet, but recently you were in the south of France. But give people a little background, a little bit about what you do, and I want to just kind of delve into what you are seeing from your prism, basically from your side of things, in terms of people seeking out help, seeking out advice, things that people are struggling with. So with that, the microphone is yours.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. So my name is Trudi Bannister. I am an holistic psychologist, psychotherapist. I'm a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher and energy healer and an author and a mum of 3 kids. So a bit of a ultimate kind of set of skills right now to deal with what's going on. So we're all, it is the great level playing field, right? We're all going through the same thing. There's a struggle for financial, for family, for, there's just worries across the board for pretty much everyone. So, none of us will get out of this without having been touched in some way, and some people really deeply traumatized. So this is one thing that's being spoken about, this global grief that's coming up and the global trauma that will result as from having this prolonged stress. So just to talk a little bit about what I do, I help my clients, I support my clients to come home to themselves, to remember their natural state, which is to be in bliss, to be pure and playful, and feel good about themselves. So generally that's how we feel when we're born, and then life shapes us. And what happens is our subconscious mind is open and like a little sponge from the age of 0 to 7. So everything we experience or continually experience, or the big things we experience, which could be traumatic or super joyful, the really big emotional experiences, stay with us and become our normal. So if those things are consistently quite good, and I hesitate to use good or bad, but that's the duality that we live in right now. That's the framework. So if we're consistently shown and told that we're of value, we feel seen, we feel heard, understood, respected, then we generally come through feeling pretty good about ourselves and having a good attitude towards ourselves and our capabilities and what we can bring to the world.
So let me ask you this, Trudy. So it's interesting you raised that kind of initial starting point and then how life basically changes. And one of the things that I have been kind of watching a little bit and I've been kind of thinking about is like for my nephews, for example. My nephews are, one is about to graduate high school and the other one is just starting high school. But those are still impressionable years and there's a sense of awareness of everything that's going around them. So, you know, you can imagine that something like this, like where they basically have spent the better part of their last, and especially if it's your last year, or in this case, it's also your first year coming in, right? Those are milestone years that you're basically now have colored with this thing called coronavirus and staying at home. And I didn't really finish my school. Who knows if I even like will be allowed to graduate? Maybe I might have to return, repeat. So that's a like a building block for those young adults, right?
Oh, it's tragic.
Kids that are younger, but maybe are, it's the same situation. It's kind of very much a shaping thing for people, not just adults, but also for children. Are if you don't mind, take a minute, because I don't know that everybody understand when you say, and it's funny because that was the first word that you said was holistic, right? Right.
Okay.
I don't think a lot of people understand. Like, I mean, I happen to do a lot of work with the spa industry, so to me that's common language, right? But I'm more interested from your perspective. When you say holistic, what do you mean?
Okay, so, and I want to go back and touch on those wonderful things that you just spoke about as well. So holistic is, so psychology is traditionally about the mind. Okay, so we talk about, the well-being of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the person holistically, it's the mind, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, the energetic. Okay, so the whole, as in the whole organism. Mm-hmm. If we focus only on the mind, and the mind, of course, has an amazing ability to change our whole experience, right? But it's not just the mind that changes our experience, it's the feelings that occur in our body and then the behaviors that result. So this is not only, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy, this is also Buddhist tradition and Taoism, and we understand the body as a full organism. For me, being holistic, I've done the energy healing training. I'm a pranic healer. I've done the mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is all about dropping below the mind and into the body. So if we can, really value ourselves as a whole organism, then we'll value the role of the body, not just the mind.
Let me share something with you that I found fascinating this weekend. I was having a conversation, and I thought it was kind of ironic that I was having this conversation around Easter, but I was in a conversation with I wouldn't say like a zealot or an overly devout Christian, but somebody who was definitely a Christian and definitely, sort of churchgoer and Bible studies and all that stuff. And it was interesting because the conversation they were having with me was in reference to a book they were reading. And the book they were reading was actually written by a Franciscan priest.
Yes.
And it was actually, I can't remember the name of the book. I wish I could remember. I think I had too much Cadbury, eggs, Easter eggs, and too much stuff. The conversation was, and what this book was basically by a Franciscan priest, is, I mean, I expected it from a Jesuit, but Franciscan is through me. So
Mm.
he said that the conversation was talking about how maybe Jesus is not God, but the manifestation of God's spirit in a person. And I
Yeah.
found that well, yes, and that if that is the case, then that God's spirit is in everything. And I found it fascinating that here we are in 2020, maybe finally we are able to have a conversation from a religious side that is echoing exactly all the stuff we're talking about here, which is that the spiritual energy, and it literally uses language like energy. And I'm thinking to myself, wait, hold on. This is by a Franciscan priest that is written about God, right? And about Jesus. And it's basically, you know, challenging those sort of black and white tenets of religion and trying to find kind of commonality based on energy and spirit and godlike behavior. And I found that very fascinating. I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent, but you brought that
Oh,
up, and it's like,
yeah.
I found it fascinating. I'm like, wow, really?
Yeah.
It's kind of,
And if we can get to the point where we take this non-dualistic view, right? Ah, that's your reality. That's what you're currently reading. So you know what that's like. You're currently reading a book. So it sounds like you may have really embodied the belief. And I too share that belief that we are all, the word God is so misunderstood and so misrepresented
right.
in current day that it's not very comfortable for all people who are not religious.
Right.
So it's interchangeable with God, source, universe, spirit.
Prime
So
energy. Yeah, right.
yeah. So I tend to use the word God, yes, less than, perhaps spirit or the universe. But it's true. We have this beautiful energy available to us, omnipotent, omnipresent, glorious energy that we can remind ourselves that this is who we are.
The reason I brought it up is because in my mind, and I think probably you and I share this, is that from that stems this sort of, like basic right that you have of a state of bliss. And
Yes.
that is sort of gifted. It's almost like the state of creativity. On my side of the fence, when I would speak to classes, and I'd have people that were so ingrained by what they were doing and have been doing for the last 20 years that they, in their minds, could not see themselves as a creative being. They just couldn't see themselves as a creative being. Zero. And I actually even had one situation where somebody actually was vigorously writing down everything I was saying, and I'm like, I know I don't have that much interesting stuff for you to be writing down every word I was saying, right? And he turns around and said, anybody has questions? His hand just went through the roof, and I said, yes. He goes, how do you be creative? And it kind of like threw me back, because I don't know how to be. I mean, it's just like breathing for me. But what it made me realize at that moment, and I actually turned around and asked the class, and this is people that were doing an MBA. This is like adults. This is not, people that don't, it was an executive MBA. And I said, well, how many people in this class consider themselves to be creative? And there were like about 2 hands that gingerly kind of went up in the back. And I said, if I had asked this question of you when you were like in middle school or when you were in kindergarten, how many of you would have thought that you were creative? Almost every hand in the class went up. So it's to your point about life changes your state of bliss, your state of sort of spiritual holisticness, connectivity with everything that's around you. And so something like what we're going through right now, under normal circumstances, anxiety, stress. I had an actual medical doctor on earlier today. We were talking about immunity and the body, mind, spirit, and just, that anxiety and stress under normal conditions takes a toll on your immunity. And so if you really want to be fighting this and protecting yourself as much as possible, definitely the face masks, but be aware that your gut health, your immunity, your stress levels, all play a role. So what have you been seeing, Trudy? I mean, have you seen a shift in where people's concerns are? What is causing them anxiety, other than what we all are facing, which is the unknown? We don't have a clue.
It's true, isn't it? Nobody really knows how we're going to come out. And what we do all know is that change is definitely permeated through the entire world, and nothing will go back to the normal that we knew, which for some people is so incredible. I mean, change is scary for humans, and particularly for people
under the best of conditions.
Under the best of conditions.
Under the best of conditions, yeah.
And particularly for people who you're talking about, like that are super linear, really linear, up in their heads, like it's going to be like this. You reference your nephews, final year, they had the plan and they've worked hard for it, and they've been sold this dream. Mm-hmm. Like if you work really hard and you get the good grades, and it'll just be a step-by-step thing, and you're going to, you'll get the house and the wife and the car, and you're going to have, that's what will bring you bliss.
Those are the measures of status. It's funny because right now, and I had this conversation last week, one of the things that's probably stressing out some people, not me, but people that are what you're referring to, that have just absolutely, this is the playbook. This is what I do, right?
Yep.
The simple definition of status.
Yes.
And the benchmarks of status have been thrown completely out the window. Like, what do you do and what do you drive? Isn't that like the cliche that when you meet somebody, avoid actually having those questions, find something else to connect with people, because it's so superficial, because it's so common. Oh, hi, my name is Raad. Oh, what do you do? Oh, what do you drive? Right?
Yep.
We're, 60 million people filed for unemployment last week. Nobody's been driving their car because they've been staying at home. Have you noticed how much of a drop in selfies there has been on the social media?
Amazing.
Like, I mean, are the people who are in the business of stop and repeats still in business? Because there's been no orders of stop and repeats at any openings, any launches, any, nothing. I know some stop and repeats have actually been repurposed as backdrops for podcasts, but pretty much that's it. And the whole human measure of status has gone out the window. Now, the good side of that is we have a level playing field of what is maybe more important than some of those material things, right?
Yeah. I
don't know.
Yeah, it's so interesting, this collective narcissism that is rife in society right now. Kids are being raised to do these selfies, and it's all about me. And when they're going through an experience, thinking what's the best angle that I can put on Facebook, or Instagram, or whatever is popular.
Always take the photo from above, don't take it from below.
Right. And we're all groomed for this. I'm not a teenager, or but I'm close to 50, but I'm still experiencing this in my and I have young children, so it's really interesting. They're kind of prior to that, and but I'm around people of all ages, and it's fascinating to see this change. So there's this collective narcissism. This is really tough on those people who've got this idealized self that they keep presenting to the world. I drive this car, and or I do this, and it's a false self. So it's really interesting. It's like that false self is crumbling, and you're forced. So narcissists they'll push against becoming more self-aware because it's too painful. Mm-hmm. But younger kids coming through and sort of starting to display those characteristics of lack of empathy and being really super entitled and willingness to sort of exploit others, which are the traits of narcissism. It's falling away. It's all back to, okay, what really matters, and paring back. Everyone's paring back, but it's super scary. People are frightened. People are recognizing the dysfunction in their families. A lot of people that I know, the husband travels while the wife stays home, or vice versa. I've lived in expat communities for the last 15 years, and prior to that, there's a lot of that, where now families are at home, both parents and the kids, and they're not used to that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of parents who have had nannies, or outsourced their kids to after school,
and they don't have that anymore.
None of that is there now. And so what's happening is domestic violence is massively on the rise. And I predicted this from day dot. I said, this is really frightening. Domestic violence is already rife, but now with all these extra pressures, we know that people don't cope well. So,
Well, it's extra pressures, and then they're also confined within the same setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just this, it's like a combustion stove, right? It's ready to.
It's a perfect
blow.
storm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's a great way to put it, the perfect storm. So what's happening is people's old trauma is coming up. They're being triggered. So emotional wounds are being triggered of, you don't see me, you don't appreciate me, you don't care about what I'm doing for you, I'm doing too much for you, nobody's doing anything for all these things that could be coming up. And, people are combusting all over the place. And of course, that needs to come out. So if they don't have the skills and tools to get that anxiousness or frustration or anger or sadness out safely, it can come out in really quite dramatic ways.
So what are your the opposite is also, I think, true as well right now, right? You have
Absolutely
been put in situations where relationships may improve.
Yes.
Things that have been maybe unproductive in their relationships are now maybe no longer there. Proximity. I mean, we used to talk about the fact that as in contact, or sorry, as connected as we are as a world these days with the technology, the level of connection seems to be in the reverse. The more connected we are, the more the more in contact we are, the less connected we are, and
Yes.
that there's a sort of a superficialness to it. And again, there's that layer of narcissism that you're talking about. It's a fascinating layer, because it's not even regarded as narcissism anymore. It's regarded as normal. Yeah. And for some people, they don't know, there is no before this.
Yeah.
There is no before a cell phone basically rules your life. There is no before. I mean, it was only a few years ago where, we were talking about inappropriateness of being on the phone when you were at dinner. That conversation over the last few years has receded. I mean, it's like, it used to be like the biggest like etiquette slap to basically be on the phone. There's still some people that talk about it, but if you monitor it, it has become less and less a conversation.
Yep.
Right? It's
Yep.
like, it's okay. It's part of our life now. So now we're thrown together in situations. I mean, there are moments, and I'm a little bit of a, like kind of a, I don't know, out of chaos comes order. And
Yes.
so there's a part of me that just kind of grins when I'm seeing what's going on right now on one level. Is it Mother Nature's way of basically saying, okay, we need a reset. We need a reset of some sort. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of fascinating. Yeah.
I think that's indisputable, Brad, because what was happening is we were being told about global warming, and we were being told to, take this seriously. And we've got these lovely, people coming out and talking till they're blue in the face about how important this is. And was anybody really shifting their behavior?
No, I'm too busy taking selfies. Of course not.
Yeah. And too busy driving my fabulous car to my fabulous job and all of that, which is, of course, that's the way of the world. And I have a very different view on life, and I'll share that with you in a minute. It's really interesting, the prelude for me to this occurring. I was called to go inward and really, really settle down. So it's like I kind of knew the wave was coming. Yeah, but it's a fascinating thing that now everybody has to stop, and pollution's just naturally, it would never have happened so quickly unless something of this magnitude had stopped the entire world.
There was a picture of downtown Los Angeles over the weekend. I think it was Friday, and it was taken from Echo Park, and it was looking down towards the skyline of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
The level of smog, the level of lack of congestion in the area, the clarity of the sky, the fact that you could see the mountains so far back was like jarring. It was breathtaking, but it was jarring. And I remember I saw where it was posted, and the comment that really struck me was when somebody said, "Oh, this must be why everybody wanted to come here."
Mm.
It wasn't about Hollywood. It wasn't
Yeah.
about, who was doing what. It was this just nature and sort of the built environment with the setting of nature behind it that conjured up that reaction. And I thought it was an interesting reaction because it was very fluid. It was very honest reaction. It was like, oh, this must be why everybody wanted to come here.
Mm.
But we haven't seen it. This is the first time like we're seeing it through these eyes. And to your point, if it wasn't for the fact that and this is actually kind of funny probably to mention on both on two levels, but I literally, because of the fact that for some odd reason podcasts are considered essential services. Okay.
Right.
So other than, finding the joy of telling my family, see, I told you always that I was an essential service. Now it's proven. But also with construction being essential service, I actually have been able to maneuver and get around a little bit, right, for work.
Yeah.
When this first started, the congestion level on the freeway was so low that I was joking yesterday and said I was looking in my rearview mirror and wondering when the marauding band of motorcyclist gangs from Mad Max were going to basically show up behind me, right?
Right.
Because it was that empty. Now,
Yeah.
in the last week, speaking to the human condition and how much restraint and sequestering people will put up with,
Yeah.
there has been a steady increase of traffic on the freeways for the last week.
Interesting.
Right.
So the initial shock has worn off. The initial, like, we don't know what is going on. Nobody really knew. And then the dust sort of settles and people feel, like they've got a little bit more information, or they're a little bit.
I don't think it's even little information. I think what it is, honestly, because we don't have any more information here. We don't know when people are going to get tested. We don't know what, when there's a vaccine. We don't know, and 16 million people filing for unemployment is a jarring statistic. I mean, I looked at the curve, the graph, and it was doing this since 1965, and then it literally shot straight up. And that was at 10 million. And I had the economist who I was interviewing, and he said, that's when you're recording data, it's reflective of when the data was collected. So we are now 2 weeks later. Don't be surprised if the numbers come in at 15 million the next time they're reported. They came in at 16 million. So I think what part of it is that in people's minds, consciously or unconsciously, there will come a point where their risk factor of sickness and virus and their loss of management of their lives, their economic well-being, their ability to provide, that is going to get to the point where, you know what, I'm just going to take a calculated risk.
Yeah.
I'm just going to risk it. I'm going to do everything I can, but I'm still going to go out there and risk it. And you see that in situations where countries who have been through war, or, like I remember having family in or relatives in Lebanon, and, after year and year and year and year, and we're looking at them, we're like, you're going out every night and partying? You guys are at a war. Well, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
So, I bet you in Vegas, there's probably some sort of bets going on when is like a pool. When is it that people are going to finally just say, no, I'm done? Is it April 30th? Is it May 15th? I don't know. But I mean, to put a lab coat on and just kind of watch it, which is not really fair because it's really affecting all of us, right? But if to look at it through that window, I really wonder, and I'm interested what you think. We're not going to go to a normal. That old normal, that's gone. We're not going to go back to what it used to be, as much as people maybe are trying to hold on to that nostalgically. Yeah. Where do you think we're going to go? Are we going to come out of this thing as a society, maybe at least for a certain period of time, better in evaluating what is important?
I certainly think so and hope so. From my little corner of the world and what I'm seeing across the world through friendships and clients, it seems to be having that effect. So people because we're all called to stay home, we're all called to go within, right? Mm-hmm. This is another piece of, it's not just for Mother Nature on the outside world, it's for each of her children to go within and clear up the inside closet.
Not even proverbially, literally go within.
Literally. So literally sit down and sit with, okay, what's coming up for me? What's coming up for me? What's coming up for me? And for someone who's done that for 20 years, more than 20 years, this is normal, natural, and, actually a joyful experience. But for someone who's resisted it, for someone who's been in their head and go, distract, do, succeed now, do you love me? Gain approval, people that have just been on the go, or, that's not the only archetype, but there's lots of ways people have distracted, denied, repressed, avoided, the going within, avoided looking at what's coming up.
Well, and to be fair, there's so much noise that it really takes a disciplined person who's determined to actually eliminate enough noise to hear that inner voice, because there is just an increasing amount of cacophony that's out there of content.
Absolutely.
I mean, I refer to it as a cacophony of content. It literally is so much noise.
Bombarding. Yeah.
Competing for your attention, constantly trying to distract you into this shiny object or that shiny object, that under the most normal circumstances, you are being bombarded. So to have the discipline, which, I'll be the first to admit, that really takes a muscle building. You got to build that muscle. You can't just call on it right there, right?
And it also, building that muscle can be on the go. So it doesn't have to be about sitting quietly in a room or sitting quietly on a mountain. It's about watching. So, I can feel that, there's a mirror for me in the outside world. Something's coming up for me. I can feel that in my body. I'm about to blow, or I'm about to cry, or whatever. And so having the ability to pause, okay, what's going on for me before you blow or after you blow, saying, okay, what were the conditions before that blew up? What were the conditions before that just occurred? And that shows you what your triggers are, or that particular trigger is. And you can tend to that wound. You can have a look at what's going on there and tend to that wound.
Because it's not really eliminating the triggers per se. I mean, you can minimize it. Sometimes they're eternal, sometimes they're not. But it's being able to have the awareness, and having maybe the proximity of time to where your awareness and the incident gets shorter, and having some sort of healthy or less damaging or destructive way to deal with that trigger, right?
Becoming more resilient. So yes, absolutely. Minimizing the damage, for sure. Like your go-to response might be to yell or try to overpower someone, or it might be to avoid. So this is fight, flight, or freeze, right? So you might go into fight, you might go into flight, so you're kind of running away, avoiding, or you might go into freeze and just not know what to do. And we tend to have one go-to response, but we will use all of them at different times. And there are other ways. You might fawn or go into tend and befriend. There's different ways of responding to situations. Noticing go-to.
Well, and understandably right now, especially, you may feel like a lot of stuff is out of your control. You lost your job. You are basically faced with the fact that you're now thrown in with a bunch of people that maybe you didn't spend a lot of time with recently. They have changed. You're having to rebuild those relationships. Maybe those relationships are strong. Maybe they're not. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you could argue is out of your control. So you may exercise some level of control, and your choice is to do it healthy or destructive. And without having an awareness that you could actually fall in one or the other category, how do you even know to avoid one until you find yourself now in that destructive behavior? And I put up on the wall, I grabbed these things from your website. By the way, Trudy, would you give out your website while we're talking about this?
TrudyBannister.com. TrudyBannister.com, yes. So TrudyBannister.com.
So Trudy Bannister, Trudy with an I, Bannister, 2 N's.com. So I put this out because I grabbed a couple of shots from your blog, and one of them was, to your point, self-reflection, which is, I'll be the first to admit, is a scary proposition when you first do it.
Right. So I'm really curious. You've clearly done the work. You've been in the industry. I know I know you well enough to know that you've done some of this stuff, but this is the thing, right? And this is where we can come from a super compassionate angle. And I'm extremely patient with the people I work with and the groups that I run and the friends that I come into contact with, or pro bono work that I do. It can be super scary. And this is the shadow work that we're called to do. So what happens is, and I'm glad we've sort of touched on this 0 to 7 period of our lives, but it's right throughout our lives. Things occur that, so we'll talk about as children, but we know it occurs ongoing. What's happened as children tends to set us up for how we feel about subsequent experiences. Right. So it's quite an important cornerstone.
Primary relationships,
yes,
acceptance, lack of it. I mean,
yeah, and whether you can make a mistake and roll with it, whether how you feel about your experiences, your successes, all of these things, whether you're fighting to gain approval, whether
were you even allowed to go through the motions. I mean,
yes,
we referred to this area, and you mentioned the word grief. I saw a graph the other day that literally took the coronavirus situation and applied the 5 stages of grief to it, which I thought, yes, you're spot on. This is exactly what we're going through cumulatively.
And this is really, really important that people are seeing this. We are definitely going through huge grief for many reasons. And we touched on the planet. The planet's going through huge grief, and so are we as a collective. There's a lot coming up. I don't, it's about grief, but also anger and frustrations. All the things are coming up.
Stages,
Yeah, and just skipping back to what we can control, the only thing that we can control is ourselves. We can't control anything else other than that. We can try to control the people around us, but that's not going to work very well for our relationships.
You should see the look on people's faces when I tell them that surrender is the ultimate empowerment.
Yeah.
And they look at me and they go, "You're nuts." But it's if you get to that point of awareness, and I'm not boasting, but it's your own personal journey. And like you said, you're patient with your clients. I mean, it really is a personal journey. It takes the time it takes the steps it takes the respites it takes, the slips, whatever. But it is fascinating to see the whole planet go through a cumulative experience.
Yes, absolutely.
Like this.
And coming back to this point of self-reflection and increasing self-awareness, it's so scary at the beginning because all of the little pieces of us along our lives that we've been embarrassed about, ashamed of, guilty for, blamed, all those heavy emotions. There's an amazing map of consciousness created by David Hawkins. And David Hawkins, and it's an incredible map that shows us that the lower emotions of blame and shame and guilt and anger are really heavy, and bliss, joy, happiness, peace are all the lighter. And so what we need to do is go within and clear the lower emotions. Hello, hi, little anger. There you are. Let's talk. Let's work together. Let's see what's happening here, and clear the experiences that have been connected to those really heavy emotions that have been anchored into our systems.
Well, and let us repeat again, because I think a lot of people that hear, sit down with these emotions and talk to them, and they're like, are you tree hugging, whatever. And let us first and foremost say, none of us, the two of us here, are not saying that it is not a scary proposition. It totally is a scary proposition.
Yeah.
But it is something that it never stops being a little bit frightening, because you're always wondering, what am I going to reveal? What am I going to see? Do I really want to see? There's an aspect of this that may show some parts of you that you don't necessarily want to see. But if it's like this, if you ignore it, if you don't basically slowly build the courage to see it for what it is, then you are basically at a disadvantage. And I think the thing that really resonated with me from your blog and the energy you're using, and I started off with this on purpose, like self-reflection is key to well-being. There was another one that I thought is actually the next stage after this, because what you gain as clarity, regardless what the matrix and mix and recipe of who you are is, that you find through self-reflection. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, and I hope I click on the right one here. Let's see. Yes, is that don't trade your authenticity for approval. And this is another one of those things that it becomes easier to understand why if you've done a little bit of that work about self-reflection.
Yeah, and recognizing to go easy on yourself. A lot of people wouldn't even know what authenticity is.
Right.
I know that from my own experience. I'd been a therapist and doing this work, doing the inner work for years, like more than almost 2 decades.
It never ends.
Right?
It's an ongoing process.
Yeah. And so this was just like 3.5, almost 4 years ago. Then we were due to move to France and my marriage ended suddenly. And I realized that even though I'd done years and decades of inner work, that there were things that I was not recognizing that were in my field. And this is where compassion comes in. What you're willing to meet yourself with and see within yourself at that stage of your, we'll call it healing, but I'll call it growth, you're willing to see. And then another life challenge comes up. And this is the beauty of these life challenges. As much as we don't love them necessarily, they do help us grow and learn and expand into more of who we are. So that experience for me was mind-blowingly, it just opened me up to, I think, the fullness of who I am. And I hesitate to say that because I feel that way now, but I'm sure there's more of me that I'll be stepping into. But don't trade authenticity for approval. So if you're an approval seeker, if you're a people pleaser, if you're gaining validation from external sources,
which we are to some degree or the other.
To some degree or another, but if that is your go-to, and we're groomed to do that without any blame to any caregiver, because everybody's doing their best with what they have. So, and if we then link this to intergenerational trauma and epigenetics, it's all we're wired to be like our parents and grandparents, and it takes a significant amount of work at times to disassemble and reassemble. But if we think of ourselves as kind of, in that way, if we go inside, shine a light on the dark corners, it's just us. Like suddenly, and I'm not minimizing it because I know how difficult it can be. And coming from a trauma-informed background and this being my passion, I'm really working with some people who are, have got a lot to open up to and manage, recognize, explore, be with, and re-own, reclaim,
accept too.
Yes. So all of that, if we do it, and it's scary at the beginning, but then you start self-reflection, just little tools, sitting for 2 minutes a day in meditation. That's just if you can't close your eyes, if it doesn't feel safe to close your eyes, lower your eyes. Just, gaze at something on the floor in front of you. And then just write a little bit. But I know with some clients, and particularly male clients, tend to just not want to write. They just don't want to write. So I'll say, do a little voice message to yourself and then delete it if you feel uncomfortable having something so personal outside of you. But just find little ways to reconnect with yourself and love yourself and accept yourself.
I mean, we don't have to necessarily journal. I mean, I get that, but everybody's got one of these, right? So you could easily kind of do a little video log for yourself in the moment, and then go back and look at it. I mean, it's kind of fascinating. Sort of Facebook does that a little bit to you when they basically show you what your memory is every day. right? And
Yes.
then you go, oh wow, really? There's no avoiding it. Facebook is going to remind you what happened. So
Yeah.
um, let me ask you this. So with that being, and the reason why I know we went down sort of this tangent that's more of a, sort of, to use the word, holistic approach to the
Yep.
self-awareness and growth. But I think, do you agree that we right now maybe have an opportunity to explore that a little bit more than before BC, before coronavirus, because we actually have been gifted this time?
Yeah. 100% unequivocally, big fat yes to that one. And so then the choice, because what we're in control of is ourselves. So people will say, oh, no, I'm still too busy. I'm watching it. I'm watching now, don't have as much work, are finding other ways to serve or create or, whatever, to distract themselves. And of course, some people are doing both. Don't get me wrong. There's no one way here.
Right.
Personally, I'm parenting 3 children 24/7. And still finding plenty of time to go within the noise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have 6 hours a day when they're at school to see clients and do things. I now have all day with them. And the beauty for parents like me, I'm getting way back in touch with, I'm spending all day with my inner child. Right? So this reparenting work, the inner child work,
Mm-hmm.
is super important, where we find ways to go back and see that little person within us and recognize what they didn't get,
Mm-hmm.
that they might have liked, recognize the needs that were not met, recognize that the ways that they saw the world and recoiled or have tried to please people or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
the anger that's come up, and the defensiveness. And we can notice that and we can start to reparent ourselves. What do you need today, honey? What would work out for you today?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the dance with my kids, and it's so good for them.
Well, it's good. It's good for you too, because you're connecting with your children in a relationship level that you were not. You got accustomed to not having. That's why it really comes down to mindset, I think, to this. I'm not knocking anybody that is basically feeling paralyzed by it or overwhelmed by it. It's totally justifiable. But I think if you take the wins, the good old, if you take the little wins, right? The little wins of that you're actually being afforded more time. You're afforded. I mean, I'm connecting with family via Zoom, okay, almost on a weekly basis now, like standing invitation to have, I talked to 12 members of my family on Saturday that I have probably not talked to other than via a little text thing on Facebook, every once in a blue moon. So if you really look at it through the filter of what is being gifted you right now versus what you are losing, I think every one of us can find something that we can come out of this feeling like we got and gained something. That's more likely very meaningful, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely. And so, whether it's gratitude journaling or just noticing, just even paring that back from gratitude, but to just noticing, or even an acceptance journal, or, making notes, going around the table, which I've done a lot with my own children. And I speak to friends about, like, what's good about this. We're very lucky. We live on a beach. It's actually our backyard. So in a not high population part of the world.
Right.
So, which is the incredible thing, because just 9 months ago we lived in the south of France and would have had a very different experience. So another piece of this is noticing, being able to notice, like, get in touch with your intuition. Mm-hmm. The more we're able to get in touch with our own body sensations and our own reactions to things internally, the more we can notice what comes from heart and what comes from, feeling a bit yucky. And so, we can really get to know ourselves during this period.
So we're gonna end here in a minute here, but first of all, I want to just remind everybody also, trudybannister.com, Trudy with an I, Bannister with 2 N's. And I really wanted to ask you about this. What do you mean by what is your flavor of bliss?
So bliss is defined as like, you know, that ecstasy, real joy, real happiness, you know, that, and it's an inside job. So that was a bit of a fun one to help people to, and it's obviously perfectly been the case, to think, okay, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean, the flavor? What, you know, what is there? And so that for me was saying, go within. What's the texture? What's the flavor? This is what we do in mindfulness-based stress reduction and any mindfulness teaching. Okay, so something's coming up for you. What's the texture? What's the flavor? How does it feel? You know, what color is it? How hot or cold is it? So you're going within your body. So it was a bit of a play actually, and quite playful. Like as though you can go to the ice cream shop and there's a row of, you know, but it's not like that. It's an internal job. That's quite an old blog post. It's interesting. My website, I haven't done anything with it for a while because all of my clients come through word of mouth, and I've been busy writing, and I do stuff on social media. So it's fun to see, you know, see what's
I thought they were very, very meaningful. And again, you know, being involved with the spa industry, we tend to be a little bit more touchy-feely. I mean, we used to say that, you know, we were very much a hugging industry. I'm going to see what happens after coronavirus, whether we're still going to be a hugging industry or what.
It'll be so interesting, right? Just this change, this prolonged change in how we can interact with each other physically. It's so interesting.
Literally that personal space. What happens now, right?
Yeah.
And it's not out of sense of privacy. Now it's out of sense of health and well-being. But the reason I pulled this one specifically is because I go read the blog. Okay, there's more to this than just the graphics on each one of these. But in that industry, we use certain terminologies interchangeably, and one of them is bliss. And for anybody who's in that industry or colleagues or peers or whatever in the spa industry, you know, I've heard the word bliss so often that it's almost become like greenwashing. It's like just generic, right? You know, may you find bliss, may you, you know, like thoughts and prayers. It's almost become generic. And so what I found interesting about the way that you wrote this one is it really is actually almost an extension of that self-awareness, self-reflection, getting a sense of who you are, that you know, your authenticity is not anybody else's authenticity. It is whatever your authenticity is. And the fabrics that weave the cloth, or your, you know, the yarns that weave the fabric of your authenticity, that's just uniquely yours. And in the same way, kind of bring it full circle to where you start off with, you know, that you are sort of, you have a God-given right, if you will, or power, a primary power right for bliss, a state of bliss. You need to know what that is, because it may be completely different flavor for you than it is for me, or even people I share my house with. It's your flavor of bliss. But if you don't know what that is, how can you achieve a state of bliss?
Yeah. And the primary thing is, and I'll reference the scale of consciousness, the map of consciousness.
Raise the book, Trudy, so they can see it.
Well, this is the page, David R. Hawkins, but my book is
Built for Bliss. And let me just put this up. It is available on Amazon, as you can see right here at the bottom.
Yeah.
So go get Trudy's book. I would love one of those signed, by the way.
Okay, no problem. It is an excellent book, even if I do say so myself. I've had so many great reviews, and it's helping, like, people coming through right now saying, oh my God, I'm referencing your book again. But with the scale of consciousness, bliss is the emotional state that's associated with peace. Mm-hmm. So when we've really been able to clear the, you know, guilt and shame and grief and fears and anger from our system, just recognizing it, noticing it's there, and becoming more resilient in terms of dealing with it, allowing it to come up. Acceptance is a huge thing. I'm huge into accepting it's okay. And if we do this with our kids, then they learn to. If my kids fall over and start to cry, I just hold them. There's no shushing like, oh my God, quick, hop up, let's keep going. which is the pain for the parent not
Right.
being able to deal with their children. So if you can start to deal with your own pain, recognize your own pain, let yourself be sad, cry, dance it out. You know, if you're feeling super sad and the actual emotion isn't bubbling up and leaving you, coming up and coming through, put some sad music on, sway. If you're angry and the anger comes up, channel it into punching a pillow or screaming into a pillow or stomping or punching the air. Is, you know, there's lots of ways that we can get this emotion that's been held in our body and has become trauma or, you know, emotional wounds, and let it come up and come out.
Well, you know,
So
we may be sequestered, we may be, you know, kept at home, if you will, and not being able to have a mobility that we're used to.
Yep.
But I think what we've been talking about here could be almost distilled to the fact that you still have the ability to go on a journey, maybe in its internal adventure, if you will, right?
yes.
And like
Oh, I love that.
and like any adventure, it's going to have twists and turns and unexpected surprises, and that's kind of what makes it an adventure, right? But if you don't get to a destination, and it may not be an ultimate destination, they don't tend to be ultimate destinations, because once you get to one, then what's
Yeah.
next on the horizon, right? But
Yeah.
but if you don't get to that destination, if you don't have an ability to reference that experience and the sense of being at that destination, then when you get derailed and the noise builds up again and the cacophony of content builds up again and the distractions build up again,
Yeah.
you really won't even have a mental postcard, if you will, to get back to that destination that you discovered through an adventure. And right now, I think if we can each find our own little, I mean, you know, they say that happiness is a journey, not a destination. If you don't,
Absolutely.
if we can find ourselves a little postcard, mental postcard of
Yeah.
that state of bliss, and it may not be, you know, the ultimate and only state of bliss, which, like I said, they don't tend to be that way. We can't really have a GPS roadmap to get back there when everything around us gets noisier, the demands on our times get higher again, the kids basically and their demands and being in school, all that's going. So again, I think this is an opportunity right now for us to go on that personal adventure if we allow
Yes.
ourselves to do so. And
Absolutely.
last time I looked, it doesn't cost anything either. There's nobody buying, you know, causing you to buy a plane ticket or, you know, rent a car or figure out what your accommodation is going to be.
And isn't this interesting? You know, you're in the spa industry. I'm in psychology. I run retreats. I, you know, offer these fabulous offerings.
Right.
Actually, right now, we're all being called to just do that for ourselves. Just to go within.
We're actually all, Trudy, we're actually all in a retreat that
Yes.
cost us nothing
Nothing.
on some level.
Yes.
And it's costing us a lot on maybe more the material level, and, you know, the
Yeah.
uncertainty of things based on how life and status and safety was being measured. But
Yeah.
while we are in this common situation, because again, even on that level, that economic level that we are all stressed out about,
Yep.
it's like any kind of therapy, right? You think you're the only one who's suffering, but all you have to
Yes.
do is open your eyes and realize that everybody around you is in exactly the same state. So the uniqueness of your experience goes away, and you
Yeah.
find strength in the fact that everybody is on the equal level when it comes to that. So ignore that and
Yeah.
focus on something else.
And that's the beauty of right now. Everybody is realizing that everybody's going through it, which is, it is so unique. There's usually some, you know, a terrorist attack unfolds in America or in, you know, in France or whatever, and the rest of the world is very sorry for them.
Right.
But
But that's
right
it.
now, yeah, and that's it. And so it is really kind of connecting into it with a bit of compassion, but, you know, but everybody, it's a felt experience right now. Everybody's going through some level of it.
Yeah.
And it's different. I cannot even imagine living in a 20-story apartment building right now, knowing there's COVID-19 cases in your building and you don't even want to get in the lift. You know, we live in a beautiful villa on the beach in a sparsely populated area. There's different experiences for different people all over the world, but we're all in the same boat to some degree. So it's having compassion for ourselves and others in our experience, right? Some people might be doing super well in that 20-story apartment building, others struggling in a beautiful home, with the backyard and the pool.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. You could be in I said that the other day. It's like somebody could be in a one-bedroom studio, and somebody could be in a huge mansion,
Yep.
and,
Yep.
and there's a certain amount of equality right now and
Yep.
equity, whether you like it or not, just by virtue of this common experience that has been put upon us, that we've been forced to go through. Like I said, it's like the ultimate
Yes.
communal experience. Like
Yeah.
this is the kind of studies that you hear about that colleges put together, except
Yes.
this is a global thing that nobody
In,
organized.
in a basement that's dark, you know.
Right, exactly. And you hold everything constant other than one variable.
Yeah.
This nobody said this together. I mean, at least as far as we know. But this is it touches everybody. That again, I think, hopefully, taking this journey communally, even though we're all in our own homes, and then having the opportunity to, if we dare, if you will, explore that own internal adventure and go on, do that self-reflection
Yes.
work that we now are being offered an opportunity to do. We don't have
Yes.
to block out 10 days for a retreat, or
Yeah.
a week
And pay
away somewhere,
thousands of dollars. Yeah.
$1,000 to go to Aruba, or God knows where. It is really an opportunity, and I really want to, again, thank you for taking the time. I know it took us a little time to get together to do this, but I really appreciate taking this journey with me. And yeah, absolutely.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've touched on so many things that I would have loved to continue to follow the thread. So if there's any questions, we can follow up. There's been so many things that we could have expanded upon and continued speaking about. So I'm sure you'll get.
You know what, Trudy, we'll do it again. In fact, I'll tell you what, keep a kind of, whatever you can share, but let's reconvene in a week or two.
Yeah, great.
And just do a little assessment, because I think, like we said, this is going through its own stages, and it's in real time. So 2 days, 3 days from now, we may be looking at riots because people are not able to basically continue to be, restrained. We could be looking at compassion being, formulated in ways that we didn't even predict. So I think, being able to talk about it at this level, and it's not going to be for everybody that listens to this show, I'll be the first to admit, but I think it would be interesting to do a little check-in, like almost let's take the pulse in a week or so.
Yeah, sure. And just on that note, anybody who's not seeing the silver lining, anybody who's not, is feeling super uncomfortable about going within and clearing what could be quite significant feelings of, oh my God, what's in there? That's okay. Wherever you are, whatever you're feeling, no matter what it is completely valid. I see you. And I know it's tricky.
And I would guess that by going to your website, especially now, that you are basically being able to be there for people, assist people, guide them, coach them, remotely. And again, that's an opportunity, right?
Yes. And what I'm considering doing is opening up groups on Zoom, because people coming together in a group, there's a lot of value because each person hears what each other's going through.
Sure.
And in group situations, that can be quite uncomfortable. But if you're in a Zoom room, and you're just on a tiny screen, and you actually don't even have to share your face if you don't want to, there can be a lot of value in group work. But definitely one-on-one. I'm working with people in America. I'm working with people in France, Canada, as obviously in Australia, because that's where I'm living right now. So Singapore.
Let me share this with you, relevant to my experience with crowd things, because I don't know that it was such a higher calling, but I did have a couple of happy hour gatherings,
right?
And we had even like a cigar night and happy hour last week. I found something very interesting, because in some cases, these are groups that I've in real life, in physical life, if you will, engaged with these people. So it's people I know, and what I realized was interesting is that whereas when we went to like a gathering, like a cigar night, business mixer, we would basically have a couple of vendors, and people would kind of group in their own little cliques, and there was some connection and some communication, but it was more kind of like you're just kind of floating.
Yeah.
What I found interesting, and of course, everybody's got their sport coat on, and there's a little bit of airs and a little bit of fronting that's going on. Nothing bad, but that's just part of the layer.
That's true. Yeah.
The interesting thing I found on Zoom is, and it even varied from week 1 happy hour on Friday to week 2 happy hour on Friday, is that people were less concerned with appearance. They were less concerned with what they were drinking versus they're just drinking whatever it is that they want to drink. They actually communicated with more depth.
Yeah.
Because they were like literally there, like you and I, like every moment in the now was engaging one-on-one with somebody. The guy who narrated or put the thing together had a couple of questions, and at some point we started asking, just, and we're going around the room, if you will, around the circle, about people's take on things. But at least for me, the level of contact, the sort of the depth of connection via the Zoom call seemed a lot deeper than what normally would happen, at least outside the immediate click of certain people. Like, the circle got a little bit bigger, the level of communication got a little bigger. So I would be interested to see, if you do that, how that compares to a real, like, therapy group session or some sort of support work that happens in real life. We may be looking at another, again, in every aspect of life, every aspect of work, in every industry, we may be looking at a layer of communication right now that is being ingrained in us over a 90-day period that will never go away. That will always be there with us.
And so the people in a therapy setting, you're being called to speak. If I run a retreat, I make sure everybody gets an opportunity. But in a social setting, you'll find your cliques, and there'll be the louder people than others. But in a Zoom room, it's like a retreat, right? You're literally handing the talking stick. Brad, what do you have to say? Roger, what do you have to say? Fred, what do you have to say? And so everybody gets a chance to be witnessed.
Mm-hmm. We asked people after the first day of doing it. We kind of almost formulated an etiquette of basically everybody mute themselves unless you're going to speak, and if you're going to speak. And it was kind of a little bit of a joke. I said, if you put your one finger up, I know you're going to go to the bathroom. You're asking for permission. If you put two fingers up, you want to speak. And then the person who's basically holding the meeting or hosting the meeting can call on that person. Because again, having been sequestered for a week, people were given an opportunity to connect, and everybody was talking all over themselves. It was a functional, dysfunctional extended family. It was just everywhere. So, but very quickly, in a group dynamic, it self-regulated. Which again was fascinating. This is 2 weeks ago, nobody did this. And now all of a sudden we have a new protocol, a new etiquette that everybody accepted as a formula for communicating, and see you again next Friday.
I love that. It's beautiful. What you've just talked about is absolutely beautiful. And particularly for men to be heard within a group of men. I mean, you have just touched upon running men's retreats.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I say it all the time, and I first admit it, is that women are a heck of a lot better at this. You guys have support networks, you have sort of more tribes and support tribes than men do. And we tend to basically, unless you're fortunate enough to be living maybe in a place where you either went to college or you grew up and you have family, friends that you kind of picked up along the way and they're still around, we tend to get fragmented, and we don't have that. And so it's interesting when either organically or something like this allows for that connection for men, because you're right. I didn't even think about it in terms of on gender basis, but yes, people are going to come out of this where they in person will connect and be in contact with one another, and their level of communication and contact is a lot deeper because they were sequestered and only allowed to communicate via Zoom. I mean, if I was doing an ad for Zoom, I'd be doing that ad right now.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. I mean, the uptake on Zoom must have gone through the roof.
We bring men together.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. And men, the way that we're raised, the way that we're traditionally raised, girls talk and they feel, and boys are like strong and hop up and keep running. Yeah. So this is really ingrained in our upbringing, and to some degree our physiological sort of response to life. So it's really interesting to hear too, like all the roles drop away, right? It's not what are you doing right now, what do you drive, what do you what's so epic about you. It's like, how are you feeling?
Well, even the gender divide or the gender role playing is now basically almost been depleted a little bit, because your traditional role as caregiver, or
Mm.
for lack of a better word, hunter gatherer, regardless of what gender,
Yes, yes,
basically is providing that in that particular relationship dynamic, because
yep,
that's not necessarily traditional anymore. But that role, that primary definition, is now basically been put on hold
yep,
indefinitely, and
yep,
you're thrown together into an environment where, like I said, the level of equity is it's going to be fascinating to see how much of this takes. And maybe it's my jaded nature to think, we'll forget about this in about 30 days. But again, this is more than just something that we experience over a weekend. And it's more than something that we experience in an isolated condition. This is a global
yes,
experience. You
yeah,
could go, in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months from now, you could be traveling to the south of France, and you could be sitting at a little cafe in Nice, and you could basically have a conversation with someone that you've never met in your life, and talk about how was it for you when this
yeah,
was going on. I mean, there
yeah,
is a common point of reference for every single human being on this planet right now. When was the last time we had that?
yeah, yeah. It's so beautiful. It actually is one of the most beautiful things that I've been talking about is the fact that, I've got friends who live in South America, a friend of mine who lives in Peru. Sorry, one sec. Thank you. My little girl. I've got friends who live in Peru who are starting a business there, and she's talking about, the economy there and what's affecting, and that's similar to what's going on in the tourist area that I'm currently living in. And
Mm-hmm.
so the fascinating piece is, and obviously in France, there's wherever you're going, like, it's interesting how there is a real level playing field
Mm-hmm.
in many of these things. We're all going through similar stuff, and we're
Well, I
all
mean,
being called to feel.
it didn't even occur to me until we were talking, and just like at that moment, again, that's sort of that allowing yourself to go through a journey of reflection, right?
Yep. Yep.
That we're doing a common reflection here, not necessarily personal reflection or self-reflection. But I grew up overseas. I went to school in Switzerland for my undergrad, and I ended up on a side of the mountain in pretty close to a social experiment. It was a school
Yeah.
that was an 1800 uh, and something building that used to be a sanitarium for tuberculosis, that had been converted to a well, no, actually, it's a beautiful building. It was actually the subject matter of a book by Michael Mann, which is German literature, actually, called On Magic Mountain. And so it was interesting, because at best, the school that existed probably 50 years, because it's no longer around, which was formulated by people who were in NATO and wanted a high school first for their kids to go to, and then wanted a
Right.
college for their kids to go to that was nearby.
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone, ran away and hid there in the library. Yes, Rambo hid in the library other than go to Vietnam, and it was a theater major. Surprise, right?
Right.
But what was interesting about it is we had people from different socioeconomic levels, people who were escapees from the Shah, during the war, uh, after the Iranian Revolution. You had people that were sons and daughters of industrialists. You had people that were from royal families. You had people that were brought in on a school scholarship from California to play volleyball in this little village in Switzerland for the local team. It was about 300 people at best. And it was Big Brother before Big Brother existed, right?
Yeah. Right.
It was on the side of the mountain. We were at the end of the road. We literally, there was nothing behind us other than mountains and like the glacier where you could go ski. So I'm not knocking. It was a beautiful experience.
No.
I was too young, I was 16, to even realize what the heck I was experiencing. But looking back, especially with the fact that the school is no longer around, so there's no physical connectivity to anything, right? Um, it's now reverted to an upper campus for the high school. We have a room there to celebrate all the people that went to the college. But other than that, the school at the college does not exist anymore. It's fascinating to watch, because for the 50 years that the school existed, and whether somebody went to the school in the 50s or the 80s, or sorry, the 60s or the 80s or the 90s or the early 2000s, there was a common experience. You could talk to somebody who was 20 years prior at that school, and you could have a common experience with them based on location, based on what was in the village, where they went. And when I'm talking to you right now, and I'm talking about this sort of common experience, I know what it's like to have that, to run into somebody who I've never met in person, to communicate with them on Facebook and still have a common ground for that conversation to start.
Yeah.
We all right now, as a race of human beings, have been given a reference point, and it's not necessarily positive or negative. It's probably both,
Yeah.
right? But you
Depending
could,
on your
yeah,
reaction.
I mean, you want an icebreaker at a party next time?
Yeah.
Ask them what happened. Where were they when the coronavirus hit? What happened? What, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit like, when Princess Diana
Right.
died, or those really significant points in time. And I can still remember, for example, where I was then. I was in Argentina on a holiday and I heard about it. So it's one of those things that gets really ingrained, and the emotional response to that gets really ingrained in your body, and you can come back to that feeling. Much like, huge life events tend to have that effect. And so, yeah, it's really an incredible experience right now. Really a very, very incredible experience. And if we can recognize that worry and anxiety and, all those concerns, and taking on the fear and the heaviness from the collective, that's a natural response. Those can be natural responses for individuals. If we can learn to suspend that and feel compassion for ourselves and others, but really then, do things to release ourselves from the worry, because it doesn't change anything.
Right.
Worrying does not change anything. It just takes away today's peace. And letting ourselves come back to the truth of what is, recognizing what we can and cannot control, which is all we can control is our response, our reaction to things, and take good care of ourselves. That's what we're being called to do.
Well, with that being said, again, everybody check out trudybannister.com, Trudy with an I, Bannister 2 N's, and then I will check in with you, my friend, in a couple of weeks or a week or so, and let's do a little evaluation. Thank you so much. I know it went over, but I really appreciate the experience, and thanks for taking the time to be there with me.
Yeah, brilliant. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trudy. You have a wonderful day. Be safe. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.